Welcome to Bucs Insider, coming to you from Bucs Studio, presented by Ticketmaster. I'm Scott Smith, and here with me is Brianna Dix. Not here today is Casey Phillips, but don't worry, she'll be back next week. So I don't know, we're just going to stand here awkwardly and wait for somebody to ask us questions?
We got it.
Okay.
I trust you, Scott.
All right, we'll do the normal things. Not a little twist because there's no game to talk about coming off the bye week, so we're going to look back at the first 10 weeks of the season coming up to the bye. Hit on some of the major points up to there. We'll still talk about the Giants game in a little bit. That's coming up on Sunday. Hit some fantasy, some trivia, injury updates. That's a big one this week.
Yes, and a little MVP situation.
Yeah, but before we do any of that, there's actually quite a bit of news regarding the Buccaneers cornerback situation this week. First of all, Jamel Dean had his 21-day practice window open.
Let's go.
He's on injured reserve, but he is now practicing with the team and can be activated at any point. I think there's a lot of hope he'll actually be back this week.
Yes, that would help solidify the back end. We would love to see that.
Yeah, and then also Troy Hill, another veteran with a lot of experience, because this has been a very young cornerback group with Jamel Dean out, and Carlton Davis now in Detroit, and Zion McCollum has been your number one, but he's only in his third year and his first year as a full-time starter. So getting Troy Hill in the mix too. Both those guys, Troy and Jamel, are on the injury report though, so we still have to see how it all shakes out by the end of the week.
Yes.
We'll talk about injuries in a minute. First of all, looking back at the first 10 weeks of the season, we want to talk about our offensive and defensive MVPs to this point. Start with offense. It's probably a pretty obvious answer, but we can talk about the candidates, right?
Yes.
So go ahead, you tell me first.
So I think one of the obvious options would obviously be Baker Mayfield. And what he's been able to do. I mean, just the theatrics, the tight windows, the scrambles, his insane I don't even want to say Patrick Mahomes-esque
The stiff
arm with Nick Bosa that was just absolutely a sensational play. But I think I'm going to touch a little bit on K. Doughton.
Okay.
Because I think with the injuries to Mike Evans, to Chris Godwin, and what this offense has traditionally been predicated on is their production, their ability in this offense. But K. Doughton, I'm gonna do a little bit of your thunder and do some stats, but he leads all tight ends with 1,583 offensive snaps played since the start of the 2023 season. That is 207 more than the next closest tight end. And I think it's really kind of unprecedented at what he's doing. I mean, really other than K. Doughton, probably other than George Kittle, there really aren't any tight ends in the NFL that are doing what he's doing. He's on the field every single play, and that is just a testament to not only his blocking ability. I can't even tell you how many times I've looked at runs on tape and it's K. Doughton that's sealing off the edge, or he's picking up a looping linebacker. But so not only his ability in the run game, but like you've mentioned, we're seeing a lot more of those routes that were traditionally given to Chris Godwin, and those are things that Cade has been able to do. We just haven't necessarily seen them. So the option routes, the outbreakers, the wheel routes that he's doing at a high level now. But to not have your two top offensive weapons that this system is built around, but to not have a drop-off with K. Doughton, I think he's been kind of a big X factor this year for the Bucs.
I'm glad you gave Cade all that credit, and it's certainly well deserving. I think the choice, though, if you have to pick one offensive MVP, is Baker Mayfield. Right. Anytime you have a top 5 scoring offense, which the Buccaneers do, and you have a quarterback performing at a high level, the quarterback is clearly the MVP. And he's thrown 25 touchdown passes. I don't know after the bye, I forgot to check, but going into the bye, that was tied for the league lead. Still has a pass rating over 103. And you said kind of briefly, just the plays, the wow plays that he makes when he, like on this one we're watching now, where he's breaking free from what seemed like sure sacks and getting the ball off. When he's scrambling for 7 yards on 3rd and 6 and not sliding at the end because he's making sure to get the play. There's the stiff arm play, which is it's our play of the year. You know, the funny thing, I was talking to Jeff Ryan about this on our podcast, the Salty Dogs, shameless plug. Next Gen Stats gave this a 42.9%, not that one, but the stiff arm one, 42.9% expected completion rate. That seems way too high.
That's what I was just thinking,
I don't think that's taking into account that he's stiff-arming the former NFL Defensive Player of the Year for about 15 yards right, at the same time. So, in any case, an amazing play. One other choice I'd like to throw out there, even though I think Baker's the obvious answer, and it's kind of gimmicky, but I would say the offensive line as a whole. If this offensive line wasn't performing at the level that it has been, this offense wouldn't be putting up these kind of numbers. It all starts there, and Baker Mayfield would be the first one to tell you that. So if you have to pick one guy, I guess Tristan Wirfs. I don't think he's been credited with allowing sack yet. So a lot of good options there, but it's Baker, right?
Yeah.
All right, let's look at defense then. Who's your defensive MVP so far?
I'm going to go with nose tackle Vita Vea.
Okay.
And he leads the Bucs with 5 sacks, but he has the most sacks by a nose tackle since 2019 with 25 and a half.
Oh, okay.
And I feel like at a position that's kind of been known for the guy that eats up blocks, the guy that commands double teams, the guy that 2 gaps, I think what he's able to do, how he penetrates the backfield, but really, I mean, he kind of sets the tone for the Bucs run defense, but also just his power to drive people back, to press, just how he overwhelms centers and guards at the point of attack. I don't think there's a guy in the NFL that is quite as dominant. And I always go back to when Jason Kelce retired, and one of the first things he said was, I just don't think I have it in me to go against Vita Vea one more time. And I think that just kind of sums everything up of his ability in the Bucs.
Yeah, one thing I want to point out, because we've been using these stats for several weeks in a row about nose tackles, because we're about to play the Giants, whatever these numbers are coming from, and previously I think we've said he leads NFL nose tackles and sacks this year, and we're using whatever stat service that's coming from has its players in certain positions. Dexter Lawrence must not be listed as a nose tackle in that because he has 9 sacks, and he is on the Giants depth chart the nose tackle.
Right.
So, Giants fans, in case you're watching this, we're not short-shrifting Dexter Lawrence. If he counts as a nose tackle, then he definitely has the lead. But that doesn't mean Vita hasn't had a great season. And I agree. It's not as easy on the defensive side as it is on the offensive side, where there's a clear choice. It's been more of a group effort, and there's been injuries to a lot of different players along the line that have made it hard to pick them. Like, I think Elijah Cansey's made a real big impact since he got back, but we can't ignore that he missed 4 or 5 games, right? Also, I forgot to throw in an offense. If Chris Godwin hadn't got hurt, he'd be the closest competitor to Baker, right?
On pace for the Triple Crown.
But the other guy I think I would just bring up is on defense is Zion McCollum. He started out really, really hot. There's been a little bit of ups and downs in recent weeks, and maybe that has a little bit to do with Jamel being out. But he's still dominated in some games. In the last couple games before the bye, he just wasn't getting targeted. And that tells me that the opposing quarterbacks know that that's not the side of the field I want to go to. So he only got targeted 8 times on 70 pass coverage snaps in those last 2 games. So he's deserving in the mix, but I think I would also pick Vita.
Well, I loved what Todd Bowles has said, too, about just his ability and his growth in those open field tackles and not leaving his feet too early. Because that was kind of one of the big things. I think his first years you're going through that learning curve, but that's something that kind of has drastically gotten better for him, and I think you're kind of seeing the fruition of that this year.
Okay, all right. One more category about the first 10 games, not about a player in particular. Just thought this might be a cool exercise. What do you think has been the most consequential moment of the season so far? And that can be good or bad.
That's a tough one, but I think I'm going to go with Chris Godwin, give him some love, but Chris Godwin's 55-yard touchdown against the Saints in Week 6. And he had his second touchdown. So the second quarter is one I feel like we would all like to forget, where Baker Mayfield uncharacteristically threw 3 interceptions, which 2 of them came off deflected passes. But then Chris Godwin kind of built that momentum back for the Bucs. We never relinquished the lead after that, but took the jet motion. Baker Mayfield checked it down to Godwin, who accelerated for 55-yard touchdown. And I feel like, to me, that was such a huge pivotal moment for the season in that game against a division opponent. And
it's what the offense has been lacking the last few weeks, right?
Yeah.
It's why you said there hasn't been a drop-off. There has been a little bit of a drop-off. It's still been pretty impressive the way Liam Cohen and Baker Mayfield have still been able to make this offense work without Mike and Chris. But there has been a bit of a drop-off. I mean, our points scored have dropped in the last 5 games from 51 to 31 to 26 to 24 to 20. So it's not a trend you like, right? But, yeah, that play is really probably the best example of what the Bucs are missing without Chris. Maybe we'll get to the playoffs and he'll be back. He's mentioned it as a possibility. My moment is going to go on the other side.
Okay.
And it's not so great. And I'm going to go with the first game against Atlanta. In Atlanta, Levante David had just intercepted a pass within 2 minutes to go. And it looked like that was going to be it. It was on the Falcons side of the field. And and we had the ball. We ran once, and then on 2nd and 13, lost 3 yards. On 2nd and 13, Bucky Irving ran for 7 yards, which would have made it 3rd and 6.
Right.
And there was a holding call on one of our offensive linemen. And there was, you can see on replay, what seemed to be a pretty obvious face mask against Bucky, but the refs didn't see it. Either I'm seeing it wrong or they didn't see it.
Yes.
In any case, it wasn't there. It is. I mean, that looks like a face mask, right?
Yeah.
In any
His
case,
head is being lunged.
in any case, the point is that it wasn't called. So what would have been offsetting penalties is now a 10-yard penalty for the Bucs. So now it's 2nd and 23 back at the 41-yard line, whereas it would have been 3rd and 7 at the 24, which is well within Chase McClellan's range. The Buccaneers are leading by 3 at this point, right? They're really trying to run out the clock, but a score would be nice as well. If you have that 2nd down play run again,
Right.
and they used all 3 of their timeouts after 1st, 2nd, and 3rd down. So when they got the ball back, they had no timeouts. If you have that 3rd and 7 run, maybe you get it. Maybe you get close enough to go for it on 4th down, or maybe you kick a field goal, in which case the Falcons need to get a touchdown. Instead, we end up punting. And Kirk Cousins has just enough time to get in range for like a 52-yard field goal and spikes the ball with 1 second to go. So you can see how just one more play could have ended that game for the Buccaneers, not giving them enough time. Or a field goal would have meant that Atlanta has to go the whole length of the field, and it doesn't seem like they had enough time to get there. I mean, they would have run the plays differently had they needed a touchdown. But I still feel like had that play stood or been allowed to be run again, there's a very, very good chance the Buccaneers win that game. Hold off and win that game 30-27. And at that point, we have a chance going into this weekend to move to 5 and 6 and be just 1 game out of first place. With and then the tiebreaker with Atlanta is even because we both would have won 1 game. And so it's basically a 7-week sprint to the finish between the Bucs and the Falcons, and it's pretty close.
Right.
So to me, that was the most consequential moment to me. If I could go back and reverse that one decision, I feel like things would be a lot better.
I think on a similar note, I would have to touch on the Antoine Winfield Jr.
Oh, yeah.
At the goal line where there was no goal line camera with
That's
that specific
true.
crew.
In the other Atlanta game, yeah. That's a good point.
Yeah, because if
Missed
there was a
opportunities.
camera,
But
I
you know
feel
what?
like,
We're crying a little bit too much about spilt milk, right? Let's get back
We
to
digress.
Let's get back to some positive talk. And usually when we're talking about injuries, that's not the most positive part of the show. But I think this week it is. So give us we've had 1 injury report, we've had 1 practice. Give us an idea of how the injury report looks.
So the practice window for Jamel Dean has opened. So he's back at practice. And then Mike Evans practiced in a limited fashion on Wednesday, working his way back from the hamstring injury. And there is a chance he could be back this week and make his highly anticipated return. So he is certainly someone to watch to see how he works throughout the week. And then Zion McCollum was on the injury list with a hamstring injury, and he did not practice on Wednesday.
Yeah, Coach said that Zion and Tristan Wirfs, who suffered that knee injury late in the last game that the Bucs, actually in the second quarter of the San Francisco game, when he was limping off the field without being able to put weight on his knee, that looked really bad, right?
Yeah.
Well, the fact that he has a shot at playing this week, that he practiced in a limited fashion on Wednesday, and that Coach said it would be really close. He used the words really close for both him and Zion as game day decisions. Now, as for Mike Evans, Baker Mayfield said he was talking to him on the practice field and said Mike sounded really optimistic about playing. So I think Bucs fans should be optimistic as well that he might be back.
Yeah.
So that would be great, right?
Yes.
Jamel, Mike, maybe Zion, maybe Tristan. It's just the
Crew
bye
comes
week.
together.
The bye week helped a lot.
Yes.
So okay, well, moving on to trivia, and I've got a trivia question for you to read there, and then we'll answer it at the end of the show.
Okay, who broke up the Giants' 2-point conversion attempt with 28 seconds left in the Buccaneers' 25-23 Monday Night Football at MetLife Stadium during the 2020 season?
You were not with us yet, but
I was
do you have
not.
any recollection of that game? Because it's Giant. You were Cowboys and the Giants.
Yes, I do, and I will say when I read it, the person that I was thinking it probably was is
You
the
got
answer.
the answer?
Yes.
Okay, good. Probably a lot of Bucs fans that know. Casey's going to be mad at me because
She feels like
the
she
one
would've
time
gotten
she's
that.
not here, I asked a trivia question about like just the last couple of years. 'Cause
Yeah.
Usually it's like from 05 or 02. She's like, come on. She got it
Or when
last
I
week.
was
You
in
weren't
middle
here.
school.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're
She
welcome.
got it right last week, though. So.
Yes, she
So we
did.
can't let her have 2 in a row.
Right.
Okay, now milestones. We like to look at some milestones that are coming up or could be achieved.
Mm-hmm.
And I noticed and did the math. Bucky Irving is on pace for 1,156 yards from scrimmage, which is good. And
Yeah.
it would be the first time that a Bucs rookie running back has topped 1,000 yards from scrimmage since Doug Martin in 2012.
Wow.
Bucs fans probably remember that season. Doug Martin, he actually had 1,924 yards from scrimmage as a rookie.
Oh,
including 251 yards and 4 touchdowns in a win over Oakland Raiders at the time.
Wow.
Which was his hometown. So that was cool. The only Bucs that have rushed for gained over 1,000 yards from scrimmage as a rookie are now, or Bucky not yet, but Doug Martin, Warwick Dunn, Cadillac Williams, Eric Rett, and LeGarrette Blount.
Wow.
So pretty exciting. Nice
Yeah.
season for him. All right, now we'll move on to fantasy. This is the part where I usually do all the talking.
Yeah.
Because you and we're not with us today, Casey, don't really care that much about fantasy football. So obviously, I think the big question for the Buccaneers in terms of fantasy football is the return of Mike Evans.
Yes.
And do you throw him, if you have him on your team, and you've had to have him on your bench for weeks now, do you throw him immediately back in? And I think this might be a point where you're a little cautious because the Giants' pass defense has been pretty good. Their pass rush is so good that it gives a lot of opportunities for the back seven to make plays. And so, obviously, if you have a team where you don't have another receiver or 2 other receivers of the caliber of Mike, then you throw him in. But if you have 3 and you're trying to decide, he's coming back from the injury, it's a tough defense to play again, and probably I would expect the Giants to double cover him as much as possible. So I'd be a little cautious with that one. But then if you're one of these people like I am who streams defenses, the Bucs have allowed the 6th most points in the NFL, so they're not really getting streamed a lot, but they're playing a Giants team that is last in the NFL in scoring, and they're switching quarterbacks to Tommy DeVito, which we'll talk about in a little bit. So this might be a good time to pick up the Bucs, stream them for their defense.
Yeah.
Yeah?
I would agree.
Okay, good. Thanks for the feedback on the fantasy stuff.
Gotcha.
Okay, we'll talk a little bit about human interest stuff, a little bit away from the football field, and I'm going to turn this one over to you because you've had a lot to do with this.
Yes. So similar to the Jordan Whitehead long form that went out in week 1.
Which was great.
Thank you so much. The Yaya Diaby long form will be posted later this week, so a little shameless tease. But I went to Atlanta and spent some time with Yaya and his family. And he spent the majority of his childhood in Guinea and is fluent in Maninka, which is one of the native languages of Guinea. But his inspirational story was 0-star recruit out of high school. So he took a gap year and worked as a wheelchair assistant at the Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport. Absolute purgatory, but worked as a wheelchair assistant and then tried out at Georgia Military College, was a walk-on, gained a scholarship, and then transferred to Louisville. And he had a lot of people in his life that were trying to tell him to give up on football, but he stayed the course. So just absolutely cannot stress enough just what he has been through, but just what an uplifting story and what an honor it was to be able to go there and spend some time with his family going through some of their pictures.
Did you go to his high school as well? Did you see a coach or?
We didn't, but it was funny. So, which he was laughing because it's not exactly the best field, but they had a drum line that was just playing in the background. So it was the full atmosphere for Yaya going back.
Very cool. All right, and finally, let's talk about the Giants game coming up.
Yes.
Both teams actually coming off a bye. Both teams also trying to snap a losing streak. I mean, the Bucs, don't love to talk about it, but the Bucs have lost 4 in a row going into the bye. The Giants had lost 5 in a row going into the bye and had fallen to 2-8. So it's been a bit of a rough season for them, and now they've made a quarterback switch. But before we talk about that, probably the greatest strength, and we touched on it a little bit already, for the Giants in any category on either side of the ball is their pass rush. And Dexter Lawrence, 9.0 sacks, getting that pressure up the middle. Dexter Lawrence has been double teamed, according to Next Gen Stats, on 64.4% of his pass rush snaps. Double teamed, and he still has 9 sacks and 28 quarterback pressures. So
That is insane.
if you have a guy, like sometimes that's the value of Vita Vea, even when he's not getting to the quarterback. He's getting double teamed, which is freeing up, other.
But he's still even able to push
to
those
do both,
guys.
do both, to soak up all those double teams and still be the best pass rusher on your team. They traded with Carolina for Brian Burns off the edge in the offseason. He's got 6 sacks. I think Azeez Ojulari has 6 sacks. They have a 13.09% sacks per pass play rate on defense that is number 1 in the entire NFL. So if there's anything that's a problem for the Buccaneers going in this game, it's that. And,
Right.
and Baker Mayfield was talking about that, how that's probably the number one concern. So, and it's obviously a concern for him.
Yes.
having Tristan Wirfs in there would be very, very nice. But Luke Gedeke,
Yeah.
Justin School if Tristan isn't playing, and then since they're getting so much pressure up the middle, Graham Barton. That's a big test for Graham. He's had a really nice rookie season, but this is probably the biggest test he'll have so far.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So, and then on the other side of the ball, the biggest news for the Giants, obviously, is they've chosen to switch quarterbacks. And Daniel Jones is going to the bench. Probably not going to play again because the obvious reason for them to bench Daniel Jones now is that they're considering moving on from him.
Yes.
Since there's no more guaranteed money in his contract, and they are afraid of the $23 million injury guarantee that he would be guaranteed if he got hurt. It's kind of like what Denver did with Russell Wilson last year, and you see from time to time around the league. So whatever the reason for benching Daniel Jones, because they haven't said that, it's just conjecture, Tommy Cutlets, is back in the lineup. He was a really big sensation late last season. Tell us what you know about him.
Yeah, so a little small sample size, but when he made the start last year as undrafted rookie due to injuries to Daniel Jones, Tyrod Taylor, he won 3 games, won the NFC Offensive Rookie of the Week when they beat Green Bay on Monday Night Football, and the win against Washington was the first time for Dable that a Giants quarterback threw 3 touchdown passes in that game. Yes. Wow. So Tommy DeVito, but I think you've just seen how he's energized the fan base last year with that kind of that underdog narrative. But just, I mean, he has the presence, strong arm, good zip on those intermediate throws. So I think he's a guy that certainly brings intrigue for the Giants.
Apparently, he does not any longer live in his parents' home, a 12-mile drive from the stadium, like he did last year, which was one of the reasons why the fans loved him. So
That's incredible.
He's moving up in the world. Yeah,
Yes.
He won 3 games in a row. A couple things to note about Tommy as compared to Daniel Jones. Daniel Jones is really an underratedly good runner, and he picks up a lot of big plays with his legs. Tommy DeVito probably is not that caliber of runner, but he's still pretty mobile. And both coaches, several coaches have already noted this week that he does move around really well and is able to extend plays and get the passes off. The other big difference is that his numbers on passes outside the numbers are significantly better than Daniel Jones. So if you're facing Daniel Jones, you're probably more worried about the middle of the field.
Right.
And when you're facing Tommy DeVito, you have to worry a little bit more about
the outbreakers,
the outside stuff, which may be good for us because if the Bucs defense has had problems this year, it's kind of been down the middle. Right? So anyway, Tommy DeVito back in the saddle. We get the first crack at him, and it should be fun. Right?
Yeah.
So anyway, and then finally, moving on from just Tommy DeVito to the rest of the Giants offense, you can't argue with the fact that they're last in the league in scoring.
Right.
They're pretty low. They're last in the league in passing yards, I believe. They're pretty low in a lot of categories. But they're not. The cupboard isn't bare there for Tommy DeVito. He's got Malik Neighbors, who they picked 6th overall, and has been really good.
Right.
Has something like 61 catches. Hasn't been getting down the field a whole lot. Only averaging 10 yards a reception, but he runs really nice routes. Can run all the routes and has had a very nice rookie season. And Coach Bowles said yesterday that he thinks he has all the talents that are needed to, at some point not too long from now, be one of the best receivers in the league. And then emerging more recently is their 5th round pick, running back Tyrone Tracy, who really has looked good. They let Saquon Barkley move on, and not every Giants fan is thrilled about that decision, especially since he's killing it in Philadelphia. And Devin Singletary they brought in to be their number 1, but this rookie has kind of taken over that role in recent weeks and looked really, really good. And I know that mainly because I was able to pick him up on my fantasy team.
Ooh, nice. But yeah, over 100 yards in 2 of their previous 3 games. And I feel like he just kind of has that elusiveness, the power, but kind of the lateral jump cuts. And then with Neighbors, I feel like one of the things that I remember about him when we the mock draft, Scott, our favorite time of the year, but was the kind of the speed variations that he'll use. But also he's kind of that guy that can burn you with the top speed. So I feel like, which if you get Jamel Dean back this week, obviously his speed ability going up against their guys. But I'm excited to see what that turns out for.
Yeah, should be a fun game. All right, well, we got to the end here now, so I'll reveal the trivia answer. Now, you thought you had it, so why don't you go ahead? So tell us what it was.
It is Antoine Winfield Jr.
Antoine Winfield Jr.
Yeah.
Consistently making plays around the line of scrimmage.
I was like, consistently, I was like, I'm just going to go with Antoine, and then sure enough, it was like,
I can picture the play. It was kind of like a shallow out along the goal line, and he broke it up. It was Antoine Winfield, then a rookie, broke up Daniel Jones's pass intended for Dion Lewis on a 2-point conversion attempt to preserve the Buccaneers' Monday Night Football victory in the Meadowlands, and that was the Super Bowl season. And the Giants were a little bit down at that point, like they are now, so the Bucs were favored in that game, and it was really close, and it could have gone the other way if Antoine hadn't made the big play at the end. So he's been doing that a lot. The one big one he made this year didn't count, unfortunately, but we expect some more of those in the future down the stretch here as the Buccaneers try to chase that playoff berth over the last 7 weeks. Okay, that's been Bucs Insider for you. Casey Phillips will be back next week, but for Brianna, Dix, and I, thanks for tuning in.